Hi guys, it's me ChazzaHD and welcome to this weekend preview for the weekend's 2022 French Grand Prix. Hopefully you're all doing well ahead of what I actually think is going to be a decent weekend. I know this track is hated by a lot of people and a lot of it hated for good reason, but with these new cars that can definitely race better, follow better, as we've seen in the last couple of races, and even the last 3 or 4 races, I think we'll get a decent race this weekend and a decent weekend of action. And it should be a very competitive weekend. Through the field. The fight for victory, Red Bull and Ferrari are going to be very close to each other. Maybe even Mercedes will be up there this weekend. We'll get more into that very, very soon. And then, obviously the midfield battle will be very close as well, especially between McLaren and Alpine. Obviously, it's Alpine's home Grand Prix, but I think we are going to have a pretty decent weekend. I don't think it'll be just a boring, forgetful weekend. And I think, if you look back to last year's Grand Prix, we had a pretty good French Grand Prix last year. And if we can have one like we did last year with those cars that could, were not that great at following a car ahead, then imagine what they can do this year. So we'll see what happens on that front. Obviously, it's very, very hot in the south of France. It normally is, obviously, at this time of year. But with the heat wave we've had in Europe, especially Western Europe, in the last week or two, it is very, very hot in that part of Europe. Obviously, there's been wildfires. Tens of thousands of people, I think, have been evacuated in the south of France due to extremely hot temperatures that took place over the last weekend. Obviously, here in the UK, we had extreme hot temperatures, and on Monday, I went out walking to go do some shopping, and it was quite a long walk that I do, like 45-minute walk, and I was in the sun the whole time. Where I'm at, though, the southwest, because I'm surrounded by coast, it's a lot cooler than it would be if you live in London or Birmingham or somewhere like that in the summer, but it was still in the sun. It was unbearably hot, and it just felt like it was on top of you so much. And I can tell you now, British people especially are not used to, and probably never will be used to, that type of heat. But yeah, the heat is definitely going to play a factor this weekend. Could cause reliability problems for certain manufacturers and teams. And in terms of tyre wear, it is going to absolutely kill the tyres around this track. I mean, the track, even if it's not hot and sunny, does wear out the tyres quite a bit because there are quite a few long, fast corners here at the Paul Ricard circuit, and long corners in general. With the added heat, though, I think it's going to be a very critical issue, tyre wear this weekend. And if it does, if it is like in the mid-30s Celsius-wise in terms of the temperature, which means the track temperature will probably be 50 plus degrees Celsius, then I think we're going to see in the Grand Prix on Sunday, we are going to see at the very, 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 very least a 2-stop. But I think we'll see probably a 3-stop race for people because it's just going to be way too much. And we'll see, what type of role that plays, the heat this weekend in France. Hopefully you guys are all doing well. Obviously, since the last Grand Prix, I've not uploaded much content. I did upload that Charles Leclerc video about why he must leave Ferrari by the end of 2024. If you do want to go watch that video, then it's in the description. There's a link below to that video. But I have to admit, since the last Grand Prix, it feels a long time since the last Grand Prix. Even though it was only, 10 days ago, it feels like it was like a month ago, honestly. Great to be back. Obviously, we've got a Grand Prix this weekend and next weekend in Hungary, and then the summer break, which will feel like an absolute eternity, given how quickly this season has gone by. But, I hope you can all join me this weekend for all of the content that I'm going to be doing. content I'm going to be doing, and all of the excitement during the weekend. And hopefully with me tonight, you will join me in previewing the French Grand Prix of 2022. Just a quick heads up in terms of my preview for that I'm doing tonight for the weekend. Upgrades are a big talking point coming into this Grand Prix, but because we don't really get to find out the full extent of upgrades until the Friday of a Grand Prix weekend, and obviously it's Thursday, I will not be getting into that much upgrades in this stream. Obviously tomorrow night I'm going to be doing a qualifying preview at the same time, 6 PM UK time tomorrow. Make sure to come along to that, where I'll, review practice and get into the upgrades itself. So I will get into the upgrades, and especially for the top teams, and look at just what they are and the effect they'll have. But until we actually get a list also, a confirmed list of what all the upgrades are for all the teams, because there are a few, then I'll leave it till then. So we will get into that later in the weekend, but just not yet. But let me just quickly, before we get into anything else, get on to the championship standings coming into this French Grand Prix weekend. In the Drivers' Championship, even though Max Verstappen finished in second place of the Austrian Grand Prix, surprisingly didn't win the Austrian Grand Prix, because I think everybody thought he was going to win that, he still has a very dominant lead over Charles Leclerc of... wait, is it? It's not that many points, is it? Hold on, let me just look. I think I might have got actually the championship standings wrong. I don't think Verstappen is leading by that much in the championship. No, he is. He is leading by that much. So I thought that was a bit of a bigger gap, a bigger gap than I actually thought it was. 38 points. But yeah, Max Verstappen is leading the Drivers' Championship by 38 points. So, yeah, even though Ferrari were great last Grand Prix in Austria and Leclerc got a very good win, there is still a mountain to climb. If Charles Leclerc and Ferrari are going to win the championship, I still don't think they have a chance because it's Ferrari, but we'll see what happens this weekend. Sergio Perez is now down to third, and then you've got Carlos Sainz fourth. Obviously, Perez and Sainz didn't score anything at the last Grand Prix. George Russell is fifth and closes the gap to Sainz and Perez ahead. And then it's Lewis Hamilton in sixth, who is also closing the gap to the drivers ahead. Lando Norris is seventh. Esteban Ocon goes up to eighth. Valtteri Bottas drops down to ninth. And Fernando Alonso is still comfortably in 10th place. In the constructors' standings, Red Bull are how many points clear? 56 points clear, I think it is. In the Constructors' Championship for Ferrari in second, Mercedes are third, about 70 odd points behind Ferrari, and then you've got McLaren and Alpine locked on 81 points, and that is going to be a very interesting battle this weekend between those two midfield teams. Alfa Romeo comfortably in between the fourth and fifth place battle, and Haas in seventh. On 51 points are Alfa Romeo. And then you've got, Haas now up to 7th, and possibly, you never know, could get after Alfa Romeo in the championship this season. AlphaTauri are now 8th, Aston Martin are 9th, and Williams obviously at the very back. Now, let's get into the track itself for anyone obviously new watching and doesn't quite know what the Paul Ricard circuit is all about. Let me quickly get into this track map. We will get onto something a bit more than just this in a second, but here is the track. The first sector is, I'd say, mostly fast, especially from turn 3 to, for the start-finish line up until turn 4. It's a very fast start to the lap. Turn 4, 5, and 6 are pedestrian and quite slow in their nature, but then from the exit of turn 6 until turn 11, you are going very quickly. Obviously, 2 long straights, a very fast and flat-out right-hander of turn 10, going into a long right-hander then of turn 11. It's a very, at times there are slow corners, but most of the track, I would say, is pretty fast. So if your car is overall, if it has good straight line speed, but also has a good amount of downforce, then, if you have the best of both in a way, then you will go very well around here. You can't just be very good at one thing around a track like this. You have to have the all-around package. But let me get on to a lap of the track. Hopefully the sound on this video is turned off, because I did actually test it before I went live, and the sound was extremely loud, so I'm hoping it's not the case. And no. So this is, I believe, Louis Delatraz in an old GP2 car going on this lap now, so I'll take you through the lap. So here we go, down into turn 1, or up, I guess you could say, up into turn 1 and 2. Turn 1, very important to hit the apex, and you go uphill very dramatically, and then downhill quickly on the exit of turn 2, and then a short little straight as you head down to turn 3. And yeah, in an F1 car, you do take turn 3 very quickly, and then you have to hug the apex of turn 4, really, and then you come into these very slow 2 right-handers of turn 5 and 6. Really should get rid of turn 6, because it does ruin the flow of the lap, and then you go through that flat out turn 7, and here is the first, or the second actually, DRS straight on the track, and you're heading now down this long Mistral straight, or at least the first half of it, and then you brake very hard for the chicane. Traction on the exit of this chicane is very, very important if you want to make an overtaking move, obviously on the exit, going up to this very fast right-hander. And yeah, you build up speed yet again, and then you go into this right-hander of turn 10, which is, in an F1 car, absolutely flat out, but it will kill the tyres on Sunday. And then you go into this long right-hander, which also does kill the tyres, because it just keeps going on and on and on and on. And then, only a few corners to go now, this left-hander, you can actually get a lot of lap time out of that left-hander he's just gone through braking as late as possible. Braking, very important for that corner. And then into the final couple corners, very important to hug the apex of that final corner, and then the lap, I think, restarting there. And then you can see he went through the final corner, which is very slow. And also, for your qualifying lap, traction on the exit is very, very important. But that is a lap of the Paul Ricard circuit. And I think, like you kind of saw, at certain parts of the track it is pretty fast, but then there are the slow pedestrian corners at times around the circuit. So, like I said, you have to have good high speed or top speed, down the straights, but you do also have to have that good slow corner performance if you're really going to get the lap time out of your car. But I think now we will move on to the teams and get into how I think they'll get on this weekend in France. And we will, of course, start with Red Bull Racing. And yeah, the last Grand Prix wasn't as bad as maybe people have made out. I mean, obviously, it was their home race. They probably should have won it, given how good they were looking for most of the weekend. Obviously, winning the sprint race was a great job for Verstappen and Red Bull. But the reason it came out after that Verstappen lost the Grand Prix was not just because the Ferrari was very quick in the race, but Red Bull, I don't think, got the setup right for the race. I think really, and this is kind of an issue when you have a sprint race during a weekend, is that you do have to kind of set your car up more so in a qualifying setup, for lower fuel than you do for a race setup, because you do need desperately, through qualifying on the Friday and the sprint race on the Saturday, to consistently have good position, good track or grid position for that Sunday race. So I think Red Bull probably prioritized, the setup for qualifying over the setup for the race, probably thinking that it would be enough if they got on pole and were able to start the race on Sunday on pole. But we saw in Austria that Ferrari were not just quicker than Red Bull, they were miles quicker than Red Bull. Will that be the case this weekend? Maybe. I mean, we could see a repeat of that, but I don't think the tide has exactly turned dramatically in Ferrari's favour. The reason I say that is because, again, I do believe they set the car up incorrectly, because Verstappen actually, during the race, was complaining that the car was doing things that he didn't really expect, or just didn't really understand why those things were happening, which is, I think, probably down to car setup. But this track, I mean, people normally think of this track as a track where, the best cars aerodynamically really go well here. That's not necessarily true because of the middle sector. The middle sector, you're pretty much flat out, except for that chicane in the middle of the Mistral Straight. So Red Bull, definitely in qualifying, maybe in the race as well, will have some very good pace and will be very quick this weekend. I don't think Ferrari are going to be like they were in the race in Austria, where they're pretty much half a second a lap quicker than Red Bull when they were both on equal tyres in that first stint of the Grand Prix. I don't think they're going to be that quick, but I will say that I don't think Red Bull are the favourites this weekend for victory around this track, because this track, I think, will suit, especially with Ferrari's now lower downforce rear wing they have, which cuts off the drag. I do think Ferrari will have enough of a car this weekend to be the favourites, especially in qualifying, to get pole position. I'd be very surprised if Ferrari are not on pole position this weekend. But Red Bull can still win this weekend. Obviously, strategy will be very important this weekend. Red Bull, we know, are very good when it comes to that. Tyre wear will be very important. I don't think necessarily we saw a stunning amount of evidence in Austria that Red Bull's issues were down to tyre wear. Compared to Ferrari, it seemed more of a setup thing than a tyre wear issue, to be honest. But yeah, Red Bull, they'll still be competitive for victory, but it's going to be a difficult weekend, more difficult than the Austrian Grand Prix. And obviously, the Austrian Grand Prix, they failed to win. So it's going to be interesting to see how Red Bull get on, but do not count them out just because they've not won the last couple of races. Obviously, at Silverstone, a lot went wrong for them. They really should have won that race had they not had the bad luck of Verstappen picking up that debris. And the last Grand Prix, simply, Charles Leclerc and Ferrari were just better. Those things, or races do happen from time to time. So if you are a Red Bull fan, I wouldn't necessarily panic about what's happened in the last two Grand Prix, because I still think Red Bull are in a great position. And as I'll get on to in a moment, Ferrari, despite winning the last two races, they're not performing as great at the moment as you would necessarily think, given that what their results have been. They've actually kind of scraped their way to those results, as I'll get on to in a moment. But quickly, let's get on to some stats regarding Red Bull. Max Verstappen and Red Bull obviously won last year's French Grand Prix, a great victory, and especially on strategy with, when they decided to pit, with a second pit stop especially. It was a fantastically controlled race from Red Bull, and Max Verstappen did a superb job to get the victory. And that victory in France last year was one of his most important in winning the championship in 2021. Red Bull have only won the French Grand Prix once with Max last year, and Max has only taken one other podium here in 2018. Remember, since we started racing in France again in 2018 here in Paul Ricard, we've only had 3 Grand Prix here. So not a massive amount of historical data can be taken necessarily from this Grand Prix track. Now, let's get into the Ferrari team. And yeah, the last Grand Prix in Austria was fantastic. Ferrari were... their pace was incredible. It was the type of pace we have seen at times this season, but obviously because of the way they are as a team, an absolute shit show, they have not been able to turn that into actual results at times, which is a shame for the drivers and especially for the Ferrari fans. But yeah, this weekend, like I said a moment ago, Ferrari will have the best car, and they will have the advantage, or yeah, they will have the significant advantage, I would say, in the corners over Red Bull and Mercedes this weekend. And because they have that lower downforce rear wing, that will help enough in combating, Red Bull on the straight. So Ferrari will be the fastest team this weekend. Maybe not in the race, but definitely in qualifying. I think Ferrari will be the team to beat, and they are the favourites this weekend. I don't think there can be really that much doubt about that. But what I want to get into quickly is like what I just talked about with Ferrari when I was, quickly moving on from Red Bull. Yes, they have won the last 2 Grand Prix, Ferrari, but they have made it so hard for themselves to get to those results. That doesn't necessarily mean that now Ferrari are back or they're now operating properly like a top team. The British Grand Prix, for example, that should have been a comfortable after, Max Verstappen had his problem. That should have been a comfortable 1-2 finish. They should not have been all that craziness with Leclerc and even Sainz to a certain degree after the safety car came in the last 10-15 laps or so. That shouldn't really have happened, because Ferrari, once Verstappen was out of play, Ferrari had the pace easily, I think, to finish probably first and second. Yeah, Lewis Hamilton was catching in the Mercedes, but would he have actually passed Sainz? Not sure. I mean, maybe he would, maybe he wouldn't. We don't know for sure, obviously. Who knows what would have happened if, Esteban Ocon didn't cause a safety car at Silverstone. But it should have been a lot more comfortable of a win. And yes, they did win, but they kind of won with the wrong driver in that Grand Prix. And then 2 weeks ago in Austria, yeah, they were easily the quickest team in the race. They should have had a dominant 1-2, really, considering how quick they were in the race on the Sunday. But they barely won still, despite how quick they were. Obviously, Carlos Sainz was about to overtake Max Verstappen, and then his engine blew up, and then Charles Leclerc had a throttle pedal problem where his throttle was sticking in the last, was it 15 laps, I think it was, of the Grand Prix. So that right there, I think, illustrates just, how Ferrari are. Even when they win, it's not like comfortably a quiet win, no issues. They just lead out front and easily win like other top teams do. When they win, they're still having these issues that see them having to, or are seeing them have to barely scrape over the line. So I don't think Ferrari have necessarily, like I said a moment ago, I don't think they've necessarily elevated themselves to this level of being a proper top team. I think they're still, very close to having a race like they had in Baku, a double DNF, or blowing a race like they did in Monaco. Stuff like that. I still think that's, very close to what they're capable of right now, and is probably right around the corner from them. So don't think Ferrari, because they've won the last 2 races, that they're suddenly back in the championship fight, because they're not. Red Bull, even though they didn't win last weekend, they still could have won Red Bull if Ferrari had, major issues with Charles Leclerc's throttle pedal. Ferrari will continue this season to have reliability problems. Because of the heat this weekend, I wouldn't be surprised, and I don't think anyone will be surprised if Ferrari have an engine blow up in the race. And there is talk, by the way, that Carlos Sainz is going to take an engine penalty for this weekend's race that will see him starting from the back. Obviously had a blowout in in Austria. So yeah, realistically, I think Carlos will be starting at the back this weekend. He won't want to start at the back in Hungary because he'll have a harder time then coming through the field, and Ferrari will probably be even quicker in Hungary as well, so you don't want to hurt your potential pace that they would have at the Hungaroring. But yeah, Ferrari are still, not that far away from being that team again, so don't think for a second that Ferrari are back in this championship fight, because I just don't see how that is possible, given what they're capable of, and given what the gap is between Leclerc and Verstappen at the moment, and also in the Constructors' Championship as well. And I think the best way to describe how Ferrari are and why they're not in the championship fight is, we saw this in Spain and Monaco, which was a back-to-back earlier in the season. Those two races Ferrari should have won. They lost both of them. But I remember saying that Ferrari, at the very least, have to win one of them. Obviously, we have a race this weekend and a race next weekend, and it's the last back-to-back before the summer break, and the last two races, obviously, before the summer break. Ferrari really should win both of these races, this weekend and next weekend in Hungary, because they will suit the Ferrari car probably the best. But knowing Ferrari, at best, they will win one of them, and if they go full Ferrari... Sorry about my throat, by the way. I've not had much practice at commentating in the last week or so. Knowing Ferrari, they might not even win both of them. So this is what I mean. And I think most likely what's going to happen, even though Ferrari will be the favourites this weekend and in Hungary to win, what will most likely happen is this weekend, Ferrari will probably start on pole with Charles Leclerc, but then lose the race somehow, whether it be a poor strategy, which is going to be very important, as I've said this weekend, when to pit and how long you go on your tyres, and reliability as well. If their engine blows up, then, that's just a blown race win, which is exactly what Ferrari have been doing this season. Yeah, knowing Ferrari, they will blow the opportunity to win this weekend, but then go and win in Hungary. That's just the way they are. The races that they should win, they do sometimes win, but the percentage of the races they should win, and the conversion rate, I guess you could call it, is like 25% really. I mean, they've won, 4 races this season, Ferrari. They should have won probably... we've had 11 races so far this season, and Ferrari have won 4, but really, at this point of the season, they should have probably 6 wins, which is, just over 50%. But they've won, just under... Is it just under 50% or 40% of the races so far? It just shows you that, again, the races Ferrari should win, they fail to do that. But, yeah, they will definitely be right up there this weekend. I have no doubt about that. They will be very competitive, but we know what Ferrari are. We know exactly what they are capable of. Not, obviously, in a good way. But let's quickly get on to some stats regarding the Ferrari team. So Charles Leclerc has 1 podium finish from the French Grand Prix in 2019. Ferrari have 2 podium finishes here since 2018. Raikkonen got a podium here in 2018, and obviously Leclerc in 2019. Ferrari's last win in France was in 2008 with Felipe Massa. That weekend they had a 1-2, and also the year before in 2007 they had a 1-2 as well. It's actually funny because during the Michael Schumacher era at Ferrari, and then just post that in 07 and 08, Ferrari dominated races in France. I think Ferrari won the French Grand Prix with Schumacher in 97, 98, 01, 02, 04, 06, And then obviously 07 and 08 with Raikkonen and Massa respectively. They used to dominate Grand Prix here in France. Obviously, the French Grand Prix used to be in Manicourt, completely different track, and what's required around that track is completely different to Paul Ricard. But this used to be a country where Ferrari would always be incredibly quick and always very, very successful. But that's not been the case at Paul Ricard since 2018. But now, let's move on to the Mercedes team, who, I have to say, did not have anywhere near as good of a weekend in Austria as I think they could have had. In qualifying, even though they had, the Friday qualifying, even though they had good pace, and they were only, I think, in qualifying trim on that Friday, when you look at the best sectors Mercedes had compared to, I think, Verstappen, who was on pole, they were only like 2/10 off, which around that track is not that bad to be only 2/10 off. But in the race on the Sunday, but also the sprint race, their pace was quite poor. I mean, in the sprint race on the not the Friday, the Saturday in Austria, they were like 3/4 of a second off the pace of Red Bull and Ferrari. And then on the race on the Sunday, they were about 7 or 8 tenths of a second off the pace. But for some reason, I've seen a lot of people on Twitter claiming that Mercedes were actually pretty quick in Austria. I mean, yeah, they were in Friday qualifying, but in the actual race on the Sunday, they were not that quick whatsoever, and their race pace was disappointing to say the least around that track. But this circuit, this weekend in Paul Ricard, should suit the Mercedes team better than the Red Bull ring. Obviously, the Mercedes, I would say, probably has a lot more grip now than, say, straight line speed than they've had at earlier points in the season. And Mercedes also are bringing this weekend an upgrade. Now, like I said, I will get more into this upgrade tomorrow because we'll get exact confirmation of what the upgrades are exactly. But there has been a lot of talk that I've seen on social media that Mercedes this weekend, with these upgrades they have, could be possibly fighting for victory this weekend. Now, we'll have to see in practice. I don't think that'll be the case, by the way. I don't think Mercedes are going to be quite that quick. I still think Ferrari are the favourites to win this weekend. And I think, given, obviously we haven't seen what these upgrades have done for their pace, but given, what we've seen since their upgrade, or the upgrades that they brought at Silverstone, I think they'll be decent this weekend, but just not that, not quite quick enough to not just be as quick as Red Bull or Ferrari, but just be a step away from them. Not, I don't think they'll be like a second a lap off the pace of Ferrari and Red Bull, but I just don't think they'll have that, say, 2 or 3 extra tenths of a second that they'll need to be right on par with them. Because even though this track, in certain parts of the track, it does suit their car, there are a few slow corners here. And we know the Mercedes car in the slow corners is pretty poor. So, yeah, I don't see the Mercedes being quite as competitive as people are expecting for this weekend. I'm just looking, though, quickly on Twitter to see if there's any talk about what these upgrades could possibly do for their pace. I have seen this, though, that Mercedes, I don't know if they've said this or that it's been reported, but they're expected to introduce one of their best upgrades of the season in the next 2 races, so either this weekend or next weekend. And engineers, according to, I think, Automotive Sport, have said that their best upgrade will be the one they can't, or we can't see, which obviously means it's most likely the floor of the car. So we'll see, what happens in regards to those upgrades. But until we actually see evidence that the upgrades have gave them an extra, I don't know, 2-3 tenths of a second, we can't really sit here and claim that Mercedes are going to be fighting for victory or definitely be on the podium. Because let's say they weren't bringing any upgrades this weekend, then I would say for sure Mercedes will be probably 5th and 6th and will be hoping that chaos happens ahead, reliability problems happen ahead so they can get a podium. That's what I would be saying. But I will hold off on that for now in case these upgrades work their magic for the Mercedes team. And hopefully they do for them, because it would be great and it would be the best thing for Formula One and for the the entertainment of the series if we had another team consistently fighting with Ferrari and Red Bull. I know a lot of people out there will probably be happy that Mercedes are not dominating Formula One anymore, which I understand completely. But the more teams you have fighting for for victory in a season, the more exciting it's going to be. Normally, the most boring seasons are the ones where you know who's going to win. If it's more unpredictable, it's more exciting. So, yeah, I think it would be a great thing for the sport. But let me quickly get into some stats regarding this team. So, Lewis Hamilton has a very good record here in Paul Ricard. He has won the French Grand Prix twice since 2018. Won it both in 2018 and 2019. And Lewis has finished on the podium at every French Grand Prix he has raced in, except for 2008. Of course, between 2008 and 2018, there were no French Grand Prix, but he's raced in, I think, 5 French Grand Prix in total, and only one of them he wasn't on the podium, which was 2008, and that was because of a very messy race he had in the midfield, because he had a 10-place penalty for, I think, hitting the back of Raikkonen in Canada the race before, and would have actually finished on the podium that weekend had it not been for that penalty. So Lewis Hamilton, as we know, is a very, very great driver. But around France, or in France, he is very, very good. And around Paul Ricard, he has proven to be an incredibly quick driver. And what is, I'd say, the best of it is that Lewis Hamilton, at the moment, you would have to say, is getting back to his very, very best form. Now, finally, we will go on to McLaren, and then we'll get to a few of your comments in the chat before we move on to the rest of the teams. Let's quickly go on to Maka. And, the last Grand Prix in Austria, I mean, their pace in qualifying obviously was really bad. They did have a lot of technical problems, though, that did hold them back. But their pace in the Sunday Grand Prix was really, really good. Ended up 7th and 9th, they did. That was a lot better of a result than I thought they would get, because I thought McLaren just wouldn't have the straight line speed, really, to make their way through the field from, 10th and 11th to get, 7th and 9th in a Grand Prix around the Red Bull ring. But yeah, they did, and it was a fantastic race result considering the lack of pace they had and the weekend they had. But because of Alpine and what they did, scoring the 11 points that Alpine did, they are now equal with McLaren in the Constructors' Championship, meaning that this Grand Prix, especially being Alpine's home Grand Prix, makes this race very, very critical for the McLaren team. I do think McLaren this weekend will have a very good package, definitely better than what we saw in Austria. And I wouldn't be surprised whatsoever if McLaren were probably the quickest midfield team, because of the, the slow corners and especially the medium speed corners. I think McLaren will go better around a track like this than a kind of a flat out Red Bull ring that we saw 2 weeks ago, and even to a certain extent a mostly flat out Silverstone that we saw 3 weeks ago on the calendar. So McLaren should be, I think, fine this weekend. It will be interesting to see what Daniel Ricciardo can do. He has had, in the last 2 or 3 races here in Paul Ricard, some pretty decent performances. He qualified, was it 7th here for Renault, I think in 2019, which was a pretty good result considering the Renault car that year wasn't that great. And then last year, here at this Grand Prix, Ricciardo finished 6th with Lando in 5th, I believe. So McLaren could, as a team, have a very, very strong result from this Grand Prix. And as long as they outscore Alpine, then that is a good weekend for them. And I expect McLaren to be the best of the rest from the midfield pack. Alpine, like I said, they will be close to McLaren. Alpine have overall got a good car, but I think McLaren, around a track like this, will have enough in the first and final sector to be ahead of Alpine. And also Lando Norris is very quick around this track, as we have seen in the past. Remember in 2019, he qualified 5th here ahead of, Sainz, Ricciardo, Vettel, that weekend. So, yeah, Lando, we know, is very quick around the Paul Ricard circuit, and McLaren should be all okay. But I'll quickly go on to these pictures, and let's see what you guys have to say quickly in the live chat regarding what I've said so far. And how do you think, guys, that Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes, and McLaren will get on this weekend? Let me know in the live chat. I'd be curious to hear what you guys have to say. Just want to say, though, for everyone watching, if you're unsure of what my schedule is for this weekend, I'll quickly lay it out. So tomorrow, I will be live at 6 p.m. UK time, about an hour after Practice 2 finishes, for a qualifying preview, obviously for qualifying that takes place on Saturday at Paul Ricard. And then on Saturday, I will be live from 11:45 a.m. all the way through till 4:30 p.m. Obviously, all UK time, that is. So from 11:45 till 1 p.m. I'll be live for the Practice 3 watch. Practice 3 watch along, and then from 1 till 3 p.m. UK time, I will be live for the build up to qualifying, and I will have probably a couple topics to go through that we'll get into. And then obviously from 3 p.m. till 4 p.m. is the qualifying itself. And then I'll do a reaction to the session for about half an hour after it finishes. So that is what I'm doing on Saturday. And then on Sunday, I'll be live from 12 p.m. UK time all the way through till about 5 p.m. And then, yeah, so 12 till 1:30, I'll be live for the race preview. Then from 1:30 p.m. till 4 p.m. UK time will be the race watch along part of the stream. I should have Nib on for the stream this weekend, and probably next weekend as well, because there's no other things going on. I don't think that he has. So yeah, he should be available for the next 2 Grand Prix in terms of being on the race watch along. And then yeah, from about 4 p.m. until 5 p.m. UK time, I will be live for the race reaction. So make sure, and also, I almost forgot to mention this, on Monday, I will be uploading a review of whatever incident or incidents or talking points, whatever you want to call it, from the Grand Prix itself, if there is enough to talk about from the Grand Prix. But if there is, I will upload that at 6 p.m. UK time on Monday. So that is the plan in terms of content on the channel this weekend. And if you are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe for more content like this. Bottom right of the screen, you do it right there. And don't forget, for everyone watching, to smash the like button and share this video and channel everywhere you can. But let's get into some comments quickly. Hello to everyone in chat, and hello to everyone watching, by the way. Dylan Forrestal asks, where do you think Haas will be after their big upgrade package? Their upgrade is next weekend, I think. Pretty sure it is next weekend, the Haas team. But where will they be? I mean, it would be nice if they were, instead of fighting say in qualifying, because most of the time in dry qualifying, I know they were very quick in Austria, but I think that was kind of more to do with the track layout and the very powerful power unit they do have, with them being so competitive there. But I think in dry qualifying, normally Haas are between 11th and 15th. If they can become a team that is consistently getting, say, one car into Q3 at the very least, then that would be pretty good for them, because it would mean they would have a chance then at finishing 6th in the Constructors' Championship. And if they were to finish in 6th, by the way, that would be a great season for them, because, the last few years for Haas have been an absolute disaster. So it would be great if they could get into that type of position. Let's just find some other comments here. Francisco says, "Hi Chazza, to me it's a bit strange that the French Grand Prix is clashing with the biggest sporting event in France finishing stage." Yeah, not great in terms of scheduling. Obviously, the French Grand Prix normally takes place in like the middle of June or the end of June, but they decided to swap the calendar around. But the Tour de France, I mean, obviously it's a massively popular event in France, but it also is a worldwide event, so there's not really that much they can do about it. Let's see if there's any other comments here. Hello to Count Blah, by the way. Great to see you, and Ottomeyer Parker. Blade Rice says, hopefully Lewis can get at least a win this season to keep up the streak of winning in every year's competed in. It would be surprising if that record was to disappear, because honestly, I assumed that would be, him winning at least one race a season would be the case until he retires. And I still think Mercedes will win a race this season, because I think we will get a race where, Red Bull and Ferrari are not quite at it, or, something crazy happens and that allows Mercedes to get a win. They might even win a race on pure pace, at some point this season. Who knows? Sparky Pete says, damn, I'm late. Not really. You're all right. But yeah, like I said, pre-last race, Ferrari the 2021 Red Bull like 2021 Merc, track specific when comparing fine specifics. Thank you for your vids again. Sparky Pete says, also, will be a good race on a real racetrack, track layout and texture like the top of the line race cars should have. We aren't watching road cars. I mean, it is a real racetrack, obviously, but I wouldn't necessarily say it's one of the better real racetracks we have out there. But I think it is no coincidence whatsoever that since we've now started on the calendar going to tracks that are purpose-built, not street tracks, that suddenly the races have come alive and are very, very good. You remember, the first 9 races of the season, we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them, or the first 9 races be street tracks. What was it? Jeddah, Melbourne, Miami, Monaco, Baku, Canada. I mean, that's just way too much. Street circuits, in my view, should be more of a novelty to make them unique. Because it is a unique thing, watching a racing car on a street circuit. And I think this, the solution that we had like a decade ago, where you only had 2, 3 street tracks a year, was the best solution, because it made street circuits and street races unique. They're not unique anymore. They're just not unique. I think 2012 we had, was it 5 street races overall, but they were spaced out massively. The first race in Australia that year was a street track, and then you had Monaco, which was 2 months later, and then quickly after that was Canada, and then Valencia, so that's, 3 street races in a row. But then I think after that you only had one more, which was Singapore 2 months later, or 3 months later. So, they were spaced out nicely, and it wasn't, all in a row like we've had this season. So yeah, I'm really happy that we're, racing at proper racetracks. And that should be the aim going forward, to race at proper racetracks. Max Verstappen came out in defense of the Spa-Francorchamps circuit, because obviously there's been talk of that track being kicked off the calendar, which is just, yeah, I can't even describe how angry I am about that even being talked about, or it becoming a rotation race, which it does not deserve to be in that position at all. He even said he doesn't want to be racing on a street track every Grand Prix. And I'm pretty sure every driver would prefer most of the tracks on a calendar to be street circuits. Or not street circuits, for it to not be street circuits, for it to be proper, challenging, unique racetracks, rather than just street circuits every fucking race. So yeah, that's a shame that F1 is becoming more like that. Obviously, next year we've got Las Vegas coming to the calendar, which is, you know, whatever. It's annoying. It really is annoying that we're having Las Vegas on the calendar. And the reason it's annoying is because we know why we're going to Las Vegas. It's purely for financial reasons. The track itself is going to be terrible, I can tell you now. It's going to be a terrible racetrack. It's going to be probably even worse than the Miami Grand Prix track. But I think we're going to get to a stage, probably in 3 or 4 years from now, that half the tracks on the calendar are street circuits. I mean, we already have that almost now. We've had, 6 races this season that are street circuits, and we've got, I think, Singapore to come. So that's 7 out of 22 races, I think, this season. You're getting near there, which is, just very unfortunate. Francisco asks, Chazza, why not use the track without the chicane and Mistral straight? Works pretty well in endurance races. I don't understand why. I don't get it. I really don't get it. I mean, the thing is, in turn 10, that very fast right-hander, flat-out right-hander, if there wasn't that much runoff and the wall was pretty close, I could understand it, because obviously you'd be going into that turn 10 right-hander at, incredible speeds, but the runoff is so big. If someone does have a tyre failure, the impact into the barrier is not going to be anywhere near as big as it would be at another track, like Silverstone, if you had a tyre failure into Copse Corner, which obviously is a flat-out right-hander. So, I don't get it. I don't get it. I know people may say that overtaking would be too easy on that straight. True, but you could just put the DRS activation further up that straight rather than where it is now. You don't have to leave the DRS activation where it is. But yeah, I don't get it. I think if it was flat out all the way from what is now turn 7 to turn 10, it would make, especially the first lap, very, very interesting with all the slipstreaming and that. Francisco asks, if length of the straight is the issue, then why is Baku not a problem? Because it's a street race, that's why. Parker says, I'm willing to bet France may be the best race of the season for the new regs. Yeah, these type of tracks is where you'll see the new regs really play out well. Because, most races around Paul Ricard with the old cars we had are going to be pretty boring. But I think a race around this track with these cars will be pretty good. Sean says they should rotate 2 to 3 street races a year. If you're going to do rotation, yeah, you should. But the problem is, these, I guess, local governments, you could say, that, in their bid to get a street race in F1 for their city, they don't want it to be a rotational thing because then it doesn't, or it isn't good marketing for them, for the city itself. So they're always going to look for that permanent, 15-year-long contract or whatever they can get out of Liberty Media and FOM. I forgot to mention, though, that Madrid won an F1 race. They, I think they wrote a letter to Liberty Media asking if, is there a possibility we could host an F1 race in 2024? Because I think the Spanish Grand Prix contract for the Circuit of Catalonia is only for next year. So, yeah, could have even more, unfortunately, street tracks on the calendar. Francisco says, I don't think overtaking would be that easy with the full Mistral straight. Signes is not an easy corner. With DRS, it would. I mean, if we didn't have DRS, yeah, it would be a bit of a tricky overtake to make. But with DRS, especially if you have it where you have it now at the start of that whole straight, overtaking would be very easy. It'd be so easy to the point where one car would overtake, and then the car that's just been overtaken would then get back in the slipstream of the car ahead and probably re-overtake because of how long the straight is, which is kind of what you... I don't think we have seen it at Baku, but it is possible at Baku because of how long the straight is. But I think now we'll move on to the rest of the teams. So let's get into the Alpine team. Obviously, it's their home Grand Prix this weekend. Alpine, as we know, it's just the Renault Works team with a different name. And they've not had great history in the last 2 or 3 years around this Paul Ricard circuit. 2018, I think they only finished like 8th and 9th, and then 2019 they had a decent result but nothing special, and even last year I think they only had like an 8th place or a 9th place with Alonso or something like that in the Alpine. So this has never been a great circuit for them historically from a results point of view, but I think they'll be pretty competitive this weekend. Like I said a moment ago with McLaren, them and McLaren will be the two most competitive midfield teams. I have no doubt about that. They are the two best midfield teams, quite clearly, out of that pack of, McLaren, Alpine, Alfa Romeo, Haas, AlphaTauri, Aston Martin, Williams. So, yeah, they'll be very competitive, very close to McLaren. I think the best you'll see from Alpine will be probably in qualifying. I think if they're going to get a very strong result, and maybe a stronger result than McLaren, then qualifying will be the key, and getting Fernando Alonso especially in the top 8 on the grid will be the key to any good result. But yeah, I think they'll be fine. I still don't think they'll be as quick as McLaren. I mean, maybe the new upgrade that they brought at the British Grand Prix will work very well around a track like this, but I think McLaren have a better car for this type of circuit, but I don't think it's going to be, a massive gap, for example, between McLaren and Alpine. But it should be a pretty competitive fight, and hopefully for the French fans, both drivers are competitively in the top 10. Now let's get into Alfa Romeo, who I feel a bit sorry for not just the last Grand Prix, but the last 2 Grand Prix. Obviously, at Silverstone and Zhou Guanyu had his massive crash, but Valtteri Bottas in that race was in a decent position to get a few points, and then he had a engine problem. Then in Austria, had to take a penalty because of that problem, starting the Sunday race from the back. And the reason I feel sorry for them is because their pace was actually really good in that Sunday race in Austria, because Bottas came from the pit lane and finished 11th and was I think was overtaken for 10th place, the final point, on the final lap by Fernando Alonso. And if Valtteri had started the Austrian Grand Prix from where he finished in the sprint, he would have started P10 as opposed to P20. or P19. Was it P19, P20? I think it was P20 that he started the Sunday race in Austria. So, yeah, I feel sorry for them because I think they could have scored a few points in that Grand Prix and probably had the pace to be right there with, Norris, Schumacher and Magnussen in that Grand Prix. So Alfa Romeo, do not, count them out this weekend, and don't count them out in general because they've got good speed. They've just had a lot of bad luck this season. Bad luck at the very start of the season when the weight limit was raised because they had they made their car perfectly for what the weight limit was before it was raised. So they had bad luck there, and they've had a lot of reliability problems this season. Valtteri Bottas has been cost points at I think 3 races now because of reliability problems. So they've got a good car, Alfa Romeo, we know this, and given how good they are looking after their tyres, that'll be very important this weekend. And I think looking at the track layout, I think their car will be pretty good around this circuit. Also, Valtteri Bottas is very quick around the Paul Ricard circuit. He always has been since we started racing here in F1 in 2018. So look out for Alfa Romeo. They will be very competitive, especially on Sunday in the French Grand Prix. Now move on to Haas F1. What a result they had in Austria. 12 points they scored, with Mick Schumacher up in 6th and Kevin Magnussen in 8th. And Magnussen finished 8th despite having an engine problem for the entire Grand Prix. Shows you just how quick Haas were. Could have been 6th and 7th if Magnussen didn't have that problem. But, I thought Haas were great in that weekend, but I don't think that will necessarily translate that performance to what we're going to see this weekend, because this track is completely different to the Red Bull Ring. A lot more slower corners, medium speed corners, when the Red Bull Ring, most of the corners are pretty fast, and obviously you have long straights. We do have a couple long straights here at Paul Ricard, but nothing quite to the level of what you'll see at the Red Bull Ring. So, yeah, I think I think Haas will be competitive for, a top 10 maybe in qualifying and maybe a point or two in the race, but I don't think we'll see quite the performance we saw at the Red Bull Ring. I think definitely what we saw at the Red Bull Ring was a lot to do with the track layout, a lot more to do with the track layout than the actual car being just overall aerodynamically, top end speed, being so quick. So, yeah, Haas will be decent this weekend, but nothing special. I am, though, hoping that Mick Schumacher can have a good weekend. Another good weekend. The last 2 races for him have been absolutely fantastic. 8th at Silverstone and 6th at the Red Bull Ring. Let's hope another points finish is on its way here at Paul Ricard. And if the Haas car is quick enough to finish in the points, then Mick should be definitely aiming to finish in the top 10. And when I got to AlphaTauri, by the way, of Haas F1, their final big upgrade package is coming at the Hungarian Grand Prix. We'll see what that does for them next weekend. For AlphaTauri, they have an upgrade for this weekend, a pretty big one, and they are hoping that it can solve their issues at high speed, because their high-speed corner performance has been pretty bad this season. There are a couple high-speed corners here that are very important, but there are some slower speed corners which will help them out, and obviously some straights that will help them out as well. So AlphaTauri, if this upgrade does work for them, it could end up, you never know, putting them in a position where they're back to what they were doing last year, where AlphaTauri were consistently one of the quickest midfield teams in the field. So we'll see if they can do that. Obviously, Pierre Gasly, it's his home Grand Prix. Hopefully, he can put in a good performance. He did put in a pretty good performance here last year. I think last year he finished in 7th, was it, in the French Grand Prix in the AlphaTauri, which was a great result. So let's hope he can do something similar this weekend. And Yuki Tsunoda needs to have certainly a much better weekend than he had Not just in Austria than what he had this time last year, where I remember he crashed out in qualifying and had a pretty embarrassing weekend for AlphaTauri. And now we'll go on to Aston Martin. If you're wondering what these pictures are, this is Sebastian Vettel doing a piece for Sky F1 with Johnny Herbert, where he drives a 100-year-old Aston Martin racing car. This is actually the first ever. There'll be another picture popping up in a moment. It's actually the first ever Aston Martin racing car from 1922, and he was driving it around the track today and was dressed in the Peaky Blinders gear, basically. Let me see if I can switch on to the other picture quickly. There you go. Look at that. That's a great sight. And yeah, both dressed accordingly. And must feel absolutely horrible driving that compared to what, obviously, he will be used to. But I'm not sure the Aston Martin will be quite as bad as what this would be around this Paul Ricard circuit. But truth of the matter is, Aston Martin, with their revision of their B car that they, the revised parts they brought to the British Grand Prix, since then, Aston Martin have been pretty poor, and they just don't have a good car really overall, especially in qualifying. They can't heat their tyres up, it seems, for qualifying runs, and that's why they've been so poor in the last few races in qualifying. It's been very bad for them, because I honestly thought they would start to make a bit of progress up the field and maybe start challenging for 6th or 7th in the Constructors' Championship, but doesn't look as though they're going to be moving any higher from 9th this season, which is dreadful. It really is, considering what this team should be capable of. Aston Martin should be a team that is fighting for, at worst, 5th or 6th in the championship. That's what they should be fighting for at worst. To be 9th and now a decent distance behind the Haas F1 team is an absolute disgrace. And yeah, next year they've got to make a better car than what we have seen this year. This year's car is an absolute shit show and an absolute shit box. So yeah, I really hope for Seb, especially, we can see a much better car. And Vettel has actually been talking about possibly signing a new contract at Aston Martin, keeping him there till, 2024 even, which is amazing commitment considering just how bad this Aston Martin team have been, what do you call it, this year and also last year as well. So we'll see what happens on that front, but I don't expect Aston Martin to be that quick, honestly, this weekend. I think they'll be maybe in that fight for the last point or so on Sunday, but in qualifying, I think they'll be very slow indeed. And finally, we'll go on to Williams. Nicholas Latifi this weekend has the new upgraded Williams car. So both Williams drivers now have the upgraded Williams. And what we saw with Albon, the last Grand Prix, where he was only a few laps away from finishing in the top 10 and getting a point, this Williams car is definitely a midfield car now. No longer is it a back marker like we saw before the British Grand Prix, or in between, say, the Spanish and British Grand Prix. And it will be interesting to see just how quick Williams can be around a track that really does test out how good your car is aerodynamically. And obviously all of the improvements have been aerodynamic on the Williams car. So it'll be very interesting to see how they get on. Let's hope they can be decently competitive, maybe even with Aston Martin. You never know what could happen there. I'll move on, or back on, to the top teams. I'll come back to you guys in the chat. Francisco, I forgot DRS existed. I've been watching too much endurance racing. Sparky Pete says, I agree on the street circuits, even wanting more USA races, but we have a lot of street races. G Walker says, hi Rooks. and etc. just got here. Update: Las Vegas will have a mega center adjoining street track located at parts of pit area. Will include kart track and year-round attraction. Well, at least they'll have that. Vladimir Rodriguez says, I think Alpine will be best in the rest, outscoring McLaren, although Fernando's car is unreliable. The two drivers are more consistent. Daniel is no fully pulling his weight yet. I think he was last weekend. Not last weekend, the last Grand Prix in Austria. I think Ricciardo was pretty good, honestly. But McLaren just didn't have that great of a weekend as a team, which hampered him. And also Norris to a certain degree. Sean says, right, for the Miami Grand Prix, most of the track becomes a car park, and Miami Open tennis courts were right by the track. Yeah. Yeah, you have the tennis courts just outside the Hard Rock Stadium, and then I think the two... Is it the two main courts? No, I think the center court they have for that Miami event. I am a big tennis fan, by the way. So unfortunately, I missed the Miami, it's called the Miami Masters event, which was at the end of March, start of April. I missed it because of my internet problems I had earlier this year. But it was just an amazing event it was earlier this year. But yeah, the main court is actually, they build it and have it inside of the actual NFL stadium itself. It's really weird looking when you look at it from a far angle. But yeah, you have all the tennis courts, so then outside of the stadium. Yeah, no real like racing legacy around. I mean, the only real racing anything in Florida before the Miami Grand Prix was it Sebring, which is in Florida, and hosts. Do they still host WEC races? You know, World Endurance Championship races. I'm pretty sure they do. I know they did in 2019-ish. I think they were still hosting races. So yeah, not much legacy in the area, and same for Las Vegas, really. There's never been has there? Was Caesar's Palace one? I can't remember. But yeah, no real legacy. The grandstand is right behind the paddock, right? Yeah, but G-Walker says Daytona. Is Daytona in Florida? And let me look. For some reason it's showing me a Daytona kart track in Surrey, in the UK. Why is it not showing me the actual Daytona track on Google? Hold on. Daytona track. Yeah, Florida. Yeah. Well, I didn't know where Daytona was. So, sorry about that. Daytona's 5 hours north of Miami. Yes, it's nowhere near Miami. It's closer to the I think quite close. Is it probably quite close to the border of is it Florida and Georgia? I think it is. Anyway, I think we'll bring this preview to an end. Guys, thank you very much for joining me for this French Grand Prix preview. And remember, I will be live tomorrow at 6 PM UK time for the qualifying preview for this weekend's Grand Prix. So make sure to join me for that. And also all the content, the hours of content I'm going to be doing on Saturday and Sunday as well. Would be great to have you along for all of that. And if you are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe. What am I trying to say? If you want to subscribe, bottom right of the screen, you can do it right there. And also, for everyone watching, don't forget to smash the like button, share this video and channel everywhere you can. Don't forget as well to follow me on Twitter at ChazHD5 and join my Discord server, link below in the description. And make sure to check out my latest video, recorded video, a link below in the description to my video about why Charles Leclerc must leave Ferrari at the end of 2024. Make sure to go check that out in the description down below. But guys, until my French Grand Prix qualifying preview tomorrow at 6 p.m. UK time. It has been me, Chazza HD. Goodbye.